I've been coming to Chelsea since I was 16 years old, but I've never been to an autumnal Chelsea, so I'm really excited to take a look around before the show officially opens for the press tomorrow. It's the most famous horticultural show in the world, and I'm here to write some articles for The Telegraph and share my views on the gardens and the judging. In this 4-part mini-series, we'll be getting inspiration from the main show gardens, but also featuring more practical designs for smaller gardens, including some great ideas for balconies or tiny spaces, some small but beautiful container gardens, and some very flashy houseplant homes. But having designed for Chelsea on 9 occasions, I can't resist the lure of the big show gardens. This is the garden that's designed for the main sponsors, M&G. It's a large main avenue garden, and it's all about creating a place where wildlife and people can cohabit successfully. And in common with many gardens on the show this year, it's using a lot of salvageable materials. And the interesting one that really sings out is the sculptural pipework that follows all the way around the garden. And they've moved it up and down in very sculptural format. And they've actually highlighted where the 2 flanges on the pipes join with this gold paint. And if you look at it, it all looks very relaxed and normal, but it's set up on CAD, on computer-aided design, with the help of an architect. And if you can see, the pipe goes up and sits on brickwork, and that is so precise that it is built to the millimetre. Now, this was built by Crocus. Crocus is a very well-known plant selling website that's grown massively since 2000 when they started. And they are the only people who actually build gardens and grow the plants. And what they do, which they've been doing for the last 8 years, is they actually build the whole garden off-site beforehand. So any minor adjustments and changes are ironed out. There's no conflag during building up, there's no surprises. So it really does just go in a really easy manner. If any build like this can be easy. It's a very successful garden. I think the planting is very restful and soft. It's got running water. It's got lots of really nice touches, like there's a little bird's nest sitting in a pipe at the top. And the trees are wonderful. They're quite native trees, most of them, so they're designed to be chosen for wildlife. And the paving I love because it's bits of reclaimed stone worked in with sets. It all looks quite random, but it's all, as I said, been very proficiently worked out. I love the pool at the front. You've got that lovely gentle gravel shore, and then you've got the gold leaf which they put on the sculpture that just drips into the water. I've never seen that before. And I think because the garden is so restful and sort of native, to have a few pops like the gold leaf, like the sculpture, which is a big pop, and little touches like the bird's nest and the wonderful big rocks, either out of stone or out of timber. So you've got a lovely contrast really between the two. It's done really well, hugely popular, everybody loves it. Well done to Hugo Bugg and Charlotte Harris who designed it, well done to M&G, and well done to Crocus. This is probably their 34th or something highly successful garden here. They're a winning team. This garden is sponsored by the Burdett Trust for Nursing, and it's all about Florence Nightingale. It's designed by Robert Myers, who's done quite a few gardens here, but I definitely think this is his best yet, and I think it's really successful. He's got so many interesting touches. The Douglas fir, which is laminated and is around the garden, is covered with letters that Florence Nightingale wrote, and he's picked out the bits that allude to plants because she was quite a plantaholic. She was an amazing girl. She was made famous by her work in the Crimean War, but actually she started nursing schools, she trained nurses, and she did a lot for nursing and health generally. She believed in the outdoor life and how important it was to health, a thing which we are now really beginning to pick up on. I like it because it's got the very classical layout. So we've got the formal cloisters around the edge with the Douglas fir all laminated. It's a very strong structural timber. You can see it's got a big cantilever and it's overhanging quite a distance of its own, so it's structurally very strong and it's pretty durable. But it's a lovely warm colour. And so we've got this very traditional cloisters, but it's such a modern take on it. Not like any cloisters I've ever seen before. They've actually got foxgloves in flower here, which you normally see in the May Chelsea, but they managed to find some for here in flower for September. Other clever touches, I think, of this pool. This is made of fiberglass, but they've actually put a lead paint effect on it. And it's really quite simple. So you could just do the fiberglass outline and then put the lead paint effect on. The paving I love. They're one of my favourite pavers that I use a lot on gardens, made by Van de Mortel. And they've got this very small unit with a very tight joint. And they're slightly handmade looking, which means they're really charming. And because this is meant to be a hospital garden, they've got what are meant to be the windows of the wards on the sides with pictures behind it of the hospital inside. So I really do feel that I'm in a hospital setting, except I've never seen a hospital with a garden as fabulous as this, apart from the Horatio's gardens, of course. The trees, they've used heptapodium. Heptapodium is that beautiful white flower, and I've never seen it at Chelsea before. We saw it at Hampton Court, and now here there are several ones that are in flower looking absolutely magnificent for Chelsea. Because Chelsea's later in the year, we've got some plants just senescing slightly, a bit of autumn colour and things like that, which is really nice. And the whole thing is a highly usable space, which I love. They've combined spaces to eat and sit in the shade with attractive features, but it's also a very beautiful garden. And I think many gardens at Chelsea are, I think, wonderful, but I couldn't really garden in it. But this you can really see being used for what it was designed for people really enjoying it. And you can really see that if you were ill and in a hospital like this, it would make you feel one hell of a lot better. Cantilevered seats. I mentioned how strong structurally Douglas fir is. Cantilevered seats out from the wall. That's really lovely touch. I think it's also clean, so relaxed, so soft, so inviting, so enjoyable. I think it's a triumph.
Sadly, the judges didn't agree. Robert Myers must have been disappointed with the silver medal, and in my experience as a Chelsea judge, I would most definitely have scored it a gold. Apparently, the judges thought the structure too big, the paving too dark, the planting too dense, and one of the walls was a millimetre out. It's galling that Robert is a more qualified and experienced landscape architect than most of the judges, the majority of which have never won a gold. The RHS needs to encourage good designers and sponsors, not insult them.
This is a unique garden. All the plants have been grown in accordance with Soil Association regulations. That's very strict. They have to be very organic. They can't use plastic pots or anything like that. And I think it's a triumph to actually be able to produce plants such a standard for a show using those regulations, and it's never been done before. It's been designed by Tom Massey, and it's in conjunction with Sarah Mead, who runs the Yeo Valley, which make the wonderful organic yogurts and kefirs and butter. I love their unsalted butter. And it's meant to be reminiscent of her garden. So she's got a wonderful garden on the farm down in Somerset. And so Tom and Sarah, with Tom doing the design, have designed this space to reflect that. And so hence they've got the charred wood that you can see popping up in places. And that's because they're making a lot of biochar. And biochar is a wonderful fertilizer that you put on, you add to the soil. And unlike charcoal, it's slightly different, and it just contains and retains the soil microbes, the soil bacteria and things like that very well. So you can really improve the health of your soil by adding biochar. And that's what they are. And they actually form quite a sort of sculptural statement. Lovely rusty water feature, very drifty soft planting, pollarded willows. Single one on one side and double pollarded willow on the other side at the front, which I've never seen before. They've had problems because this garden was designed for maybe a year and a half back in spring, and so they've had to change the palette of colours quite a bit, And it means that it just takes a lot more work really to create something like that. And some of the trees did start to go a wee bit too autumnal. So fairly late on in the build, they had to change 1 or 2 trees over once or twice. And that you might think, oh, that's no trouble. But it is when you're moving trees this size and you've started to build up around it, moving them with big kit and big machinery, it takes a lot of disruption. But I think it's a very soothing garden. I think it's lovely that it reflects Yeo Valley Farm and the garden there. So it really has a strong message. And I think it's come together really well. There's a big hanging seat in the centre and it's a main focal point, but I almost wonder if it's just occupying a bit too much of the space, because I've seen ones like that before. And what I like when I come to Chelsea Show Gardens is to see touches I've never seen before. And if you see things that are a wee bit predictable, it's not quite so good. But generally, I think I love it. I love the way he's used the rough grass around the edge. And I think that, where others have got lovely mown, row-lawn all around the edge, we've got a lovely tufted meadow, and it just sets the scene. And it's so peaceful with the running water, although we've got a lot of big kit here because we're just about ready for judging. The garden's all been prepared, and we've got big road sweepers. So I'll leave you with that in mind as it drowns me out to my right. This garden is definitely a first for Chelsea. It's got a very strong message behind it, and it's for Guangzhou city in China. And what they've done very successfully in China, maybe only secondly to Singapore in the world, is they've really started greening up and cleaning up their cities. And this is designed by Peter Schlemihl, who has done work in China. And there are very many clever touches here that you might miss if you don't understand it thoroughly. First of all, the structures, laminated bamboo. They've chosen bamboo because it will last for about 25 years. And also when you cut it and make things of it, it actually regenerates very, very fast. And it also takes up a lot of carbon, far more than trees. So it's a really is a plus positive plant to use in these sort of gardens. Now in China, they're doing sort of green lines through the cities, like green lungs really. And they've got a little bit of water at the bottom, which is a blue kidney. And they've got lots of plants in it, like the pickerel plant and equisetum, that actually filter and clean up the water. Then at this end of the garden, they've got this lovely green wall. And what it is this green wall actually sucks in air to clean it. So you get what is known as phytoremediation and bioremediation, 2 big words there. But basically all it means is that these plants will be cleaning the air, and then they're pumping it round the clean air, and then it goes into these pods. So if you're sitting in that pod, you've got lovely clean air around you. So you get the feel-good factor because you've got this amazing greenery with lots of trees that really are very good at absorbing the carbon, particularly the metasequoias, lots of metasequoias here. And then you've also got other pods here, smaller structures which are meant to be bird hides or ones that swing. Other clever touches that Peter Schlemihl has introduced, so you've got sort of insect homes and bird feeders. They're made out of recycled plastic, and the plastic they've used actually recycles 95%, which is much higher than normal, and it's all cut on the computer, so it's a very intricate design. Basically, I think it's a really good garden for actually showing and helping people understand how nature and getting green into the city can really improve the quality of life for us and for the nature around it. And China are really keen to get this message across. It's something we really haven't logged onto as much as they have, as I said, in Singapore and in China, which they're really making huge strides. And we can learn a lot from these gardens. And when I spoke to Peter Schlemihl, and he had a pretty rough, it's his first Chelsea, he's never done a big garden like this. So although he's done cities and massive projects as a landscape architect, he's never done a Chelsea garden. And he said it was a big learning curve because you've got to produce this in something like 21 days from start to finish. So you've got to be heavily, heavily organised. And the build-up, the weather wasn't bad. We had very hot periods. And then we had one day of floods and storms. And on that day, Peter actually fell into the water feature. I almost think, because there are so many gardens here that are talking about how we should improve our cities, improve the way we treat the planet and have lots of green things, I almost think that those series of deluges on that Tuesday was like a little lesson to us all that this is why we've got to do it. We are having these flash storms and climate change really seems to be a thing, and we really need to do something about it, and we must really treat nature and the environment with a lot more respect, learn a lot more about it, and take very positive measures, just as Peter is doing here. I think it's tremendous. He said he doesn't mind if he doesn't get a goal, he just wants to get the message across. And I think he really does generally feel that. So, fantastic. This garden, for the Trail Finders, they're a tour company, their 50th anniversary, is not a garden, it's not a landscape, but it's a fusion of the two. And I think it's very clever that Jonathan Snow, the designer, flags that up, because a lot of gardens are actually like that. They're showpieces, aren't they? And this is showing the foothills of the Himalayas, which is where Trail Finders took their first tour 50 years ago. He's made the wise choice, I think, to include the rhododendrons. We've got two lovely rhododendrons behind me. Now, obviously, if this was in spring, they'd be in full bloom, and they don't like you. The RHS don't really like you using plants that aren't in flower. But hey, if you didn't have rhododendrons, it really would not look like the Himalayas. Other things that really flag it up, but the prayer flags you have all around. There's like colourful bunting. I thought it was bunting, but Jonathan corrected me. No, they're prayer flags, which you see everywhere. It's got a little prayer hut. It's got a lovely sort of shelter at the top. The water is treated very nicely. These gardens are totally flat. When you come in on day one, they're just flat bits of grass. And he's raised it up subtly, and it does feel very mountainous. And as such, it does feel much larger, I think, than the flat sites of the same size. Anyway, well done, Jonathan. Well done, Trail Finders. I think I might go to the Himalayas next.
Next in this mini-series, we'll be looking at some of the smaller show gardens and some great design ideas that can be translated into any size garden.